While I do have a lot of playtime in Dark Souls 3, it's not a game that I ever envisioned myself doing a challenge run for. People have beaten this game at Soul Level 1, with starting equipment, without rolling, with only rolling, with fucking bananas for a controller, so I struggled to think of anything interesting, fun, and unique to do that still sat within the legitimate parameters of the game. As a result, I turned to modding, and one particular spell in Cinders stuck out to me: Fecal Expulsion. It's about as impractical as the absurdity of the spell's name suggests it might be, launching a shotgun blast of dung pies in a forward cone that do a whopping 20 damage each. The biggest downside is that they're affected by gravity, which means that they all splatter on the ground in front of you after a short distance, but the advantages are that unlike the dung pie item, it will knock over any target small enough that gets hit by the splash, and it doesn't inflict toxic on the caster. With these aspects in mind, it's time to ask the question: can you beat Dark Souls 3's Cinders mod using only Fecal Expulsion? Starting off by picking an appropriate character name as well as the Jester class that begins with the spell so I don't have to go all the way down to Earthhill to find it, the master key and the only good voice since Bloodborne introduced it, I start off at Firelink Shrine and give the spell a test run against the two nearby enemies. The general rule for this spell is that even against enemies you can knock down with it, you still want to use it to apply Toxic and then play defensively until it expires and you can inflict it again because of its slow cast time and unreliable hitboxes. The most effective way to use it tends to be at a short range rather than point blank, and you can even fight enemies with impunity by using the terrain in some cases. Rescuing Cornix allows me to get his Covenant Seal and enables enemies to drop Fire Seeds, which I'm going to need 15 of for later, and Cornix's set might not even boost Fecal Expulsion's damage, but it looks cool so I threw it on anyway. Unfortunately it doesn't count as fire damage so it doesn't do much to the pus of man, so I'm forced to fire when I get the opportunity, and as it turns out I won't be getting those very often thanks to that cast speed. Even crystal lizards take direct hits from the butt fudge blast without even flinching, and while upgrade materials are unimportant in this particular run, my greed is still going to get the better of me and common sense won't stop me from trying. I take my first death at the tip of a basic hollow sword, and it finally begins to sink in how careful I have to be with this spell as my primary weapon. Your focus points naturally regenerate very quickly in the Cinders mod, which handily eliminates that frustrating aspect of resource management between the two Estus flasks, but that doesn't stop me from taking risks and getting bisected by a halberd guy. No, I don't think I want to do this just yet. I'll be right back. A bad roll causes my third death, and playing chicken with a Lothric Knight's sword gives me a fourth, and I haven't even beaten Vort yet. The good news though is that Vort goes just about as well as he usually does, and I beat him on my first try. Holy Knight Hodrick's Invasion gives me a great chance to test out the real utility of the spell against a player model target, and it works quite well. His use of warmth to try to keep himself healed is thwarted by me explosively blasting him out of the area of effect, and then unthwarted by my dumbass getting smacked in the head by the locals. It took a bit longer than usual, but Hodrick eventually goes down with the sickness, and I throw the Conjurator set on for a boost to my maximum FP. To satisfy my own curiosity, I give Curse-Rotted Greatwood a shot, and it goes a lot better than I expected, so much so that I seem to have caused the fight to break when I won on my second attempt, and the ground gave way as it died. One bag of the Devil's Sugar, an intrusion by a guy who came from inferior hardware and poisoning a demon to death later, I run through the undead settlement into a boss fight that I totally knew about beforehand and was definitely prepared for. Oh dear god, help, 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 help. Hey, I got him first try. Go me. At the chest guarded by 2 packs of rabid chihuahuas, I'm reminded of one of the major disadvantages of my primary weapon, but thankfully I lit the bonfire beforehand so I can quickly get my souls back and almost die to the Outrider Knight so he doesn't feel like he missed out or something. Using the hill to my advantage, Lunch Lady Doris isn't too difficult as she perfectly dodges my shit gun. Would you believe that Word tried to autocorrect that to shotgun? But isn't quite able to exit the splash zone in time and ends up quite literally taking multiple dumps before dying on a freshly smelly hill. Fortunately for me, the only stat that really matters right now is Vigor, so I dump all of my levels into that from both my souls and a kind gift from Yol, which I'm sure doesn't have any downsides whatsoever, and clean up, or should I say, dirty up, a few other things in Firelink Shrine while I've got a break. Crystal Sage almost goes down first try, but thanks to some reckless play, I managed to burn through my Estus Flask charges, and Crystal Sage finishes me off with a Crystal Soul Spear, straight through the kneecaps. The second try goes quite a bit better thanks to the nearby terrain that I can use for cover as life gems come in clutch to keep me alive as the boss slowly melts. I have a slightly stressful moment as a Cathedral Evangelist smacks me out of my cast animation and tries to pin me in the corner for the 3 count, but she backs off, giving me enough time to escape and unclench. The NPCs here all go down to an unstoppable wave of explosive mouth diarrhea, right before I'm messily destroyed by the teleporting dogs. Awesome, love this game. I take advantage of the fact that neither of them are vaccinated, and while attempting to use gravity, which doesn't work quite as well here, I instead resort to taunting my opponent by lighting a bonfire right in front of him. I'll always take the bonus points for inflicting emotional damage. With a death or two as I begin to approach the bowels of hell itself, gravity actually works in my favour here, as I can just drop the kids off at the pool right here, and poison the skeletons to death, don't question it, before even jumping down the hole. This is one of the few really great things about this otherwise impractical spell, and I'm going to exploit it for all it's worth while I've got the chance here. The infamous no-clipping crystal lizard escapes my rectal wrath, and I just barely make it to the wall near bonfire before taking a moment to wonder how on earth I'm going to win this fight, so I decide to come back to it later. Normally what I like to do as I approach Smoldering Lake is provoke the Mimic into attacking the nearby demon, which is done by the player attacking the Mimic, then making sure to stay close to the Mimic as you lead it downstairs to the demon, and on the rare occasions where it actually works, you'll be treated to a nice spectacle of a chess monster roundhouse kicking a burning brick shithouse demon for over 700 damage, and in my experience the Mimic usually wins here. Unfortunately, it took a bit too much damage from the demon's fire breath, and while that did provoke the Mimic into attacking the demon a bit earlier, it couldn't quite stick the whole fight out. It made my job a lot easier, so good job with that assist, Random Catacombs Mimic, we're proud of you. Nightslayer Sorig isn't quite as fireproof as he should be while next to a boiling lava lake, and the knockdown effect of Fecal Expulsion trivializes the fight, and after the lone Black Knight just passed him, I make it to Hellier of the Lake and ascend Fecal Expulsion to Great Fecal Expulsion with the 15 fire seeds that I've been saving up. Doing this doesn't remove the original spell, which is good since it'll still be useful, and it's the reason I put a few levels into attunement because I need 3 slots to be able to attune both of them at once. Giving it a test fire, I'm glad that it's a spell that launches them from my mouth, because if they were leaving me through the other end, I'd probably need an anesthetic. With renewed confidence, I find the Fashion Souls guy to give myself a much needed upgrade to go with my shiny new spell and have a go at Corrupted Gundyr. As seems to be the theme for this run, I get my shit pushed in on my first attempt and pull out the win on the second, again I swear I'm not trying to make number 2 jokes, and go over to my real prize, the Censoring Palm. Equipping it does several things. 1, it passively increases my movement speed by 10%, which is more noticeable than I initially assumed it would be, and it stacks with other movement speed items I'll be getting later. 2, it allows me to parry by pressing the left trigger instead of using Combustion. 3, it can be infused, which grants some kind of useful benefit such as passive health regeneration, but you still need to find a gem for that, and it can be done to my Pyromancy Flame too, so that becomes my next objective. I later end up going with the Vibrating Infusion since stacking health regeneration is going to come in handy with this huge health bar that I'll end up with, and I can get the less important faster casting speed through other means. With a lack of embers for that big health boost that I'm going to need in this run, I take on Vort a second time with the handy-dandy tomes that can be used to revive bosses, and promptly get my dick slapped off by the Angry Road of Sacrifices locals. It's at this point that I remember that you can earn primordial fragments by beating bosses without taking a hit, and so I resolved to do this with Vort, and I honestly probably would have been better off trying it with Dancer because I failed again and again and again. One more go at it so I can upgrade a ring later, and Holy Knight Hodrick revisits me with things going just about as smoothly as they did last time. The expanded Cone of Fire allows Great Fecal Expulsion to hit him even if he dodges to the side, so building Toxic on those pesky input reading NPCs becomes a touch easier. Nightslayer Soreg says hi to my face with his shitty Dragon Bone Smasher knockoff, so I decided to take my chances on Wolnir just for my own curiosity. To the surprise of nobody, a dung-spewing, sack-wearing Pyromancer reject going against a skeleton god is a one-sided fight. Or is it, because I again won on my second attempt. The dog guarding the breach to Irithyll very politely accepts my request to eat some shit and leaves behind a much-needed holy gem that's going straight into my palm. Cathedral Guardian does his job pretty damn well as I'm smashed into paste right outside it, and yet another second attempt victory restores my Embed status, which was totally on purpose. Reloading my game to make Yuria spawn in and... What was I doing again? It occurred to me that I'd never explored the area past Hellier, so I go down there now and I'm greeted by your average Dark Souls 3 PvP gank squad, which goes down on, say it with me now, the second attempt. Fighting them one at a time proves to be the strategy, and it's here that I notice Great Fecal Expulsion's biggest weakness. The expanded Cone of Fire means that you can't consistently hit your target with enough dung to effectively break their guard, and I bet nobody's ever said that sentence before, so finding the best moments to swap between them becomes a skill that I need to sharpen. Making my way to Rosaria just in case I need to respec, the White Knight, Hallowed Knight guarding her kills me with Divine Fury until I come back again to show him that he picked the wrong school of magic, and Sanctum Knight Norjask's completion of a no death no bonfire run in Dark Souls 2 doesn't faze me one bit as I smack his invisible weapon away and give him a manure-based beatdown. Deacons of the Deep were a boss that I had mixed expectations of. On one hand, I know that my crowd control is good, but the biggest problem I anticipated would be having enough poise to tank the occasional staff smack or fireball to the face. And Phase 2 has them cast a spell that slowly builds the player's curse meter if it isn't stopped by killing enough of them in time. My damage output isn't great, and my damage per second from toxic buildup will have to carry me through this fight, and much to my surprise, it does without a hitch for a win on my first try. Abyss Watchers goes horribly wrong, and for the first time in a while I find myself dying in the first phase, which hasn't happened in quite some time. I stink at parrying this boss, and this is not a good time to try and get my groove back there, so I keep going at it and win on the third attempt. It's at about this time that I feel confident enough to try out one of the memories that Cinders adds that are effectively a gauntlet mode, and it goes terribly. Over in the memory of strength, the enemies you fight will be a lot stronger, but the upside is that you earn an absurd amount of souls from most of the enemies here. If you begin the memory and get ravenous crystal lizards, you're in a good spot because killing just one will net you over 35,000 souls, and you can stack on all kinds of things that boost your soul gain, just to rake in the souls after every kill. If you get some undesirable enemies or just want to call it quits, then you can just use a homeward bone to leave, but in my case I died just about 8 minutes in, and came out of it with almost 500,000 souls, which is enough to give me a respectable 50 vigor. Wandering Knight Osvaldo is no match for an actual shitlord, then I come to the spot where you normally get Fecal Expulsion, and somehow it still surprised me to not find the excrement-covered ashes here. Pontiff Salivan is a boss that I've always struggled with, but it's always satisfying to get that initial parry on him. Oh, of course. With a new record of 10 deaths to a boss, Pontiff goes down, and I enter a part where I would go offline if I was playing this game vanilla because I would rather give birth to a chair than fight most of the shitheads that pollute this game's PvP. As a quick side quest to grab something I knew about but missed out on at the time, I revived the Abyss Watcher so I can make Forgotten Lachlan spawn in so I can kill him for the unique ring he drops, the Dashmaster's String. His weapon doesn't do very much damage, but one hit from his spells almost deleted me completely, so after a tough fight, he coughs it up. This ring increases your movement speed by a whopping 25%, stacks with anything else that increases movement speed, and can be upgraded to a maximum of 50%, and this is as broken as it sounds to the point that even the camera struggles to keep up. Eldritch is one of the bosses that you'll either wipe the floor with or die to when he inevitably uses that god-awful arrow rain attack unless you brought along Twisted Wall of Light, and fortunately he goes down first try this time. I wasn't even worried. The Sun Princess ring will come in handy stacked with my existing health regen and respectable health pool, so I throw it on and continue down into Jump Scare Dungeon, immediately dying to the most fair Dark Souls 3 enemy, and coming back to enact my brown vengeance. Then I'm slaughtered by 2 rats and a crystal lizard that I immediately regret freeing, so I decided to pump the brakes and go back to Abyss Watchers to beat them a second time, since I had to revive them to make Lachlan intrude and I could use the health boost from being embered. This time they go down first try, and I'm greeted by Alva on my return to Irithyll Dungeon, and I get what may be the most satisfying kill on an intruder in this whole run. I like to think that he died of embarrassment. Round 2 on this glowing red butt plug goes even better with me managing to even dodge its lasers, and I save color, which is one of the many force of habit things that I'll be doing in a lot of these challenge runs. What the hell is this? Alright, I'll come back later then. So for reasons that I really don't know, the Yorm fight was reworked into a more normal fight rather than a gimmicky reskin of Storm King. I wouldn't have struggled against him so much if everything wasn't constantly exploding, and the theme of a boss taking 2 attempts continues to hold. I was expecting the game to teleport me to Emma so I could take on Dancer, but apparently I have to do that myself now, so Dancer goes down first try. This sounds weird to say given my weapon of choice, but I might be a little bit overpowered for Dancer, although not nearly overpowered enough for Inquisitor Ashford, who absolutely obliterates me with Crystal Soul Spear. On my return, I find out that Twisted Wall of Light doesn't seem to repel Fecal Expulsion, which is great for me because if this guy gets a shot off, then I'll almost be killed in a single hit. Osiros the Consumed King consumes an avalanche of ass pudding, going down on my first try, although I was a bit worried there because he was doing a lot more damage to me than I remembered him being able to. The in-game message might say plunging attack, but those are for casuals. We go in all dungs blazing and kill a wyvern first try. The second wyvern on the way up the mountain fares somewhat better than the boss does, owing to the fact that the cameraman seems to have an aneurysm in this specific location, but he also goes down first try. The best Dark Souls 2 boss goes down about as well as that game's general reception, and the Afflicted Grave Robber has the stones to whip out the Ichimochi combat art from Sekiro, so I know who to be afraid of the most, as if his curse build-up wasn't bad enough. Second try once again, and farther down the path I notice my feet sink into the ground here, so I do what anyone else would, and see how much I can hide myself in it. Father, help. There's no way in hell I'm a match for Nameless King now, so I go do some housekeeping before I see how close I can get. Okay, how about the Swamp Brothers? Much better. Bewitched Knight Iwai dies of embarrassment. Seriously, I only thought I remembered pulling that off once in this run, but I did it twice and it felt great all over again. Then the guy with the Gargoyle's Flame Hammer doesn't seem to think anything of the guy whose hands are glowing and promptly gets his shit ruined. Gravity once again shows me that it has no allies, and I try my luck trying to provoke the nearby pus of man infected dragon foot thing to spew its curse juice everywhere and insta-kill the pursuer, but I don't quite manage it and he instead dies from the raw damage. Shame, because there's something extra funny about having enemies kill each other by accident like that. The second dragon's foot stands absolutely no chance against the poo-poo 130 firing shots from above either. Now, Dragon Slayer armor was a bitch and a half on my first playthrough, killing me more than any other boss with a record of 14, and I show this bastard exactly what I think of him with a win on my first attempt, which wasn't close at all. Annoyingly, my embed status is taken from me right afterwards by the stupid-looking Jizzhead Priest, and definitely not my own recklessness. Nope, shut up. A long trek through the Grand Archives has a familiar boss kneeling on a balcony, and I was always bummed about how they changed his name from Mirror Knight to Looking Glass Knight in the superior game, I mean Dark Souls 2. So I play well enough to heal at a great time and get wrecked before I can roll through an attack that I saw coming during my poorly timed mushroom trip. Attempt number 2 gets me killed after 2 consecutive early rolls, and the third time's the charm. Gank Squad number 4 stomps me, but not before I can hit the bonfire just beyond them, and on the second visit their heavily specialized and practical builds all go down to a literal poo-flinging pyromancer. Thankfully this build will never enter the cesspool that is PvP. I don't even know why I actually tried to kill the fat angels here. Normally it's for the Titanite slab, but that's useless to me. So I guess I might have been trying to clear the path to where an Estus shard is in the vanilla game as old habits once again catch up to me, so abandoning that plan brings me to a familiar pair of bosses on the bridge, one of which chops me neatly into ribbons. Great. I can't even cheese this game and get away with it. It takes me a little while to shake off my concerns after fighting the Twin Prince reskin down in the profane capital, but I go in and get destroyed. Twice. I also found a cool little bug with this fog wall. Anyway, I'm a little light on Estus to take on Champion Gundyr right now, so after a quick test of the waters followed by a tactical retreat, I get my Fashion Souls finalized and steel myself for another go at the Twin Princes. After over an hour's worth of attempts and more hard drive space than I would like, the Twin Princes finally go down. With the final boss now available, I felt like it would be more fitting and ending to go back and tackle some bosses that I struggled against or missed earlier, as well as the DLC, which I completely ignored up until now, and Champion Gundyr is the first thing that comes to mind. Fortunately, he bites it after only a single attempt this time, leaving me to go and get incinerated by the Blacksmith's Nightmare Intruder. By this point, I'm not quite as stingy saving up my embers, so I just pop another one and hope that by keeping my health up, I won't be immediately cremated if he does that again. And his decision to use his admittedly incredibly cool Smelter Sword, which I myself am somewhat fond of back in Dark Souls 2, blows up in his face as he also dies after a short rematch. It's worth pointing out that when I play games like this, specifically From Software's series of action RPGs that covers Demon Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and Elden Ring, which I came up with an acronym for some time ago, FSARPG, or FSARPG if you're feeling a little bit extra memey, I like to go through the map killing all the regular enemies I encounter once, and then if I die and encounter them again going through the same area, I consider them fought already and don't kill them again, which in turn helps prevent me from potentially overleveling. Normally I wouldn't really explore here unless it was a new character, since I would usually want things like the Quakestone Hammer, but I was curious to find out if those items had been replaced or moved, so I took the chance to look around and see what I might be missing. Turns out that armor made from cloth isn't very effective at preventing boo-boos from 10-foot tall brick shithouses swinging around their axes like fly swatters, so I get myself killed the first time before returning to clear the area out again. My search ends up being fruitless, but I can't say I didn't try my best, so now I make my way through the area, making sure to pick up the Frozen Chaos Essence, which you'll see the effects of soon, and as soon as I enter the area that I like to call Australia due to the abundance of flies, I'm immediately attacked by a ninja. I do hit L2 with the torch out rather than the palm, which causes me to singe his eyebrows with the combustion, but I didn't penalize myself for that or anything since he wasn't a boss, and even if he was I could just survive him anyway. The new bonfire here and commune point takes me to Velstadt from Dark Souls 2, as if these games weren't recycling themselves enough as it was. Oh god, I didn't mean it, I'm sorry. Just kidding, first try. A trip to where the Titanite slab usually is greets me with 3 bright bugs, so I go over to what used to be the Grave Tender and his Pitbull, only to find an ice demon replacing the normal sized guy there. The Frozen Chaos Essence that I picked up not long ago increases my frostbite resistance by 50% during this fight, and I didn't get Ingvil's Crystal, which also increases my magic absorption by 25% during this fight because I didn't know where it is, and didn't want to look it up, but after 4 attempts I managed to pull through. It's a quick jog to Sister Frida from here since I've already opened the door and got the bonfire, and I actually barely managed to scrape through on my first try thanks to the occasional Ziegbrow, as well as Phase 1 being fairly easy, Phase 2 allowing me to tear through both of their health bars at once if I can get Toxic on both of them, and then Phase 3 is, well, it's Phase 3. Sister Frida, one of the most difficult bosses in the game, goes down on my first try and leads me neatly into the Ring City DLC. The angels in the open swamp are about as fun as they are in the base game, but luckily I do remember where the little shits that summon them are, and equip my 4 damage nullification boots before hopping down to the route that leads to the first one. The Demon Prince fight is usually one that gives me trouble, and while I did remember that in Phase 1, killing one of them causes the Phase 2 version to gain a meteor attack, and killing the other causes it to gain a laser attack, I couldn't remember which was which, so I winged it. And I also won on my first try. I kind of hoped that putting on the massive humanity helmet would cause the ladder to fall, but sadly I'm left with disappointment. And on my way up, I make sure to show off my ritualistic mating dance. Ladies, please, take a number. Medea goes down for what's supposed to be a riposte once he's been weakened enough, but fortunately it isn't necessary to knock him down, and a few more blasts of Fecal Expulsion does the job nicely. I'm pleasantly surprised to find that in the place of the Chloranthy Ring plus 3, there's one of my favourite Dark Souls 1 weapons, right behind the Dragon Greatsword of course, just sitting on this statue waiting for me. The mimic behind the ladder becomes one of Gravity's many victims and drops the Black Witch Veil, which I didn't look at here, but it effectively acts as a light version of the lingering Dragon Crest ring. Dark Eater Medea's only real saving grace is his huge health pool, but that's nothing that an unlimited supply of dung pies can't solve, and he goes down, remarkably enough, on my first attempt. It isn't necessary to kill Judicator Argo here, but I usually like to, even though it doesn't stop the Zealots from showing up. It's mostly just a spite thing. Typically, it's a good idea to weaken the first healer enough to get Half-Light to spawn, then weaken Half-Light enough to get the second healer to spawn, then kill both healers, but I don't have the reliable damage output that I usually do here, and while it takes some time, Half-Light does bite it on the first try. Glaive Master Hodir tries to stop me, but his efforts are futile and he manages to drop an entire game for me. What a nice guy. Speaking of nice guys, Slave Knight Gale wants my Dark Soul, and I told him that I've got 3 of them and he can borrow my copies if he wants, but he chose violence, so a fight begins. That was fun and definitely didn't catch me off guard at all. Next up is the Marauder, and I really hope that I'm more than a match for this guy with maxed out health. With no Estus remaining, I add his soul to my inventory. Nameless King goes down by the skin of my teeth, and I've become so powerful now that I even managed to kill my game by just trying to warp to the Grand Foyer. Naturally, the game complains when I reopen it, but I tell it to suck it up and be a man, and it lets me back in to go and kill Twisted Knight. Yes, at this point I am looking up where all the bosses that I've missed are, which in hindsight was probably a bad idea, but I also didn't want to miss any bosses given that this was my first time going all the way through Cinders, so I couldn't really win here. But little did I know the remnants of Lordran were waiting for me where Guinevere's boobs used to be. So I take the warp into it for one attempt before getting my shit absolutely destroyed before deciding, fuck that, I'll come back when I'm a god, and took on Soul of Cinder instead. He killed me enough times that I was here for a good 45 minutes, one time killing me while I was in the middle of using an Ember, but I eventually won using only my excrement shotgun. I only died once against the remnants of Lordran, but that was enough to tell me that I'm going to want all the Estus that I can get for that fight, so I went to the Grand Archives to get another one, then I completely forgot to actually give it to Andre. Going in with only 10 Estus, a handful of health regen, and a dream, I actually managed to win on my second try while also being so close to death for the majority of it that a red Tearstone ring setup genuinely would not have been a bad idea. With that, the game is complete using only the 2 Fecal Expulsion spells, and my character sits at level 137 with maxed out Vigor, 20 Attunement, and I'm 1 point shy of Endurance for a nice even 40, but I think I can let that go as I save and exit, then lock this character's save data in a vault where it's never going to see the light of day again. In summary, this run was a really dumb idea, but it was a lot of fun, and I'm still glad that I did it because it gave me a very good reason to revisit Dark Souls 3 again. It isn't my favourite among all of the Fasapigs, but I will say that I believe it has the best combat as well as equipment variety even in the base game. Then content mods such as Cinders and Convergence make it so much better, and refresh the experience so it only feels like you're playing the same game again at its foundation, but so much has been changed that it's worth exploring and re-experiencing. I've got more videos like this in store which are far easier to edit than my similarly themed Gone Postal series which have a much longer runtime and show much more gameplay, but I did want to try my hand at making a Can You Beat style video, and I do hope you enjoyed it, so thank you all very much for watching, and goodbye.